Welcome everyone, all of you here for today's event. And I have to say, advancing DEIA in challenging times, so apropos, wouldn't you agree? And this is also the 90th anniversary of the School of Social Work here at UD. Yeah. We're celebrating all year long, 2024. And March is National Social Work Month. So a lot to celebrate, while at the same time, a lot to discuss relative to this serious topic. So I'm literally just giving you a big welcome to everyone here in the room and also to all of our Zoom colleagues. Can't see your faces though, I just want to let you know. But we appreciate you all being here. I now have the privilege of introducing our interim Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Dr. Philomena Cortelli, and she will introduce our three illustrious panelists. Thank you. This is the camera space, Philomena.
So welcome everybody, and it's really an honor and a privilege to have our esteemed panel here today to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in challenging times. And I mean, these are indeed contradictory and challenging times, because for social work, diversity, equity, and inclusion is just the bedrock. It's the foundation of everything that we do. These are key social work values and ethics. And you know, we are committed to advancing DEIA. At the same time, we're seeing a spate of anti-DEIA backlash, with states actually passing laws that are, you know, banning DEI initiatives, and a slew of other legislation that's trying to be passed in about 48 different states around the country. So it's a very important topic, and it has so much relevance for us as social workers. So I'm going to turn it over to our panel, and but first I'd like to introduce our panelists. So my left is Seval Yildirim, and she's the Vice Provost for Inclusive Excellence at UB since she joined us in 2023, November 2023, and we're just thrilled to have her. And she's focusing on UB's efforts to create a culture of equity and inclusion university-wide. And as Vice Provost, she's playing a key role in partnering with our senior leaders, diversity officers, and academic support units across the campus to further UB's goals around inclusive excellence. She has extensive administrative experience related to equity, diversity, and inclusion, including in the areas of recruiting and retaining faculty and students from underrepresented groups, promoting inclusive pedagogy in classrooms, and building high school to university pipelines. Prior to UB, she served as Vice President for Diversity Initiatives and Chief Diversity Officer at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And she also served prior to that as Associate Provost for Faculty Affairs and Development and Co-Chief Diversity Officer at California State University, San Bernardino. So she brings this extensive experience. On top of that, she's an expert in international human rights law, and her scholarship focuses on secularism, religion, and state relations, and individual rights in liberal democracies. She's held visiting faculty positions at Harvard, UC Berkeley, Villanova University, and New York University. And she has a JD and LLM from NYU University School of Law, an MA in International Affairs from George Washington University, and a BA in Politics and Women's Studies from Randolph-Macon College. So really wonderful welcome. Next is Jacqueline Hall, and Jacqueline is a proud graduate of the UB School of Social Work, I believe in 2005, was it? And she's also currently a DSW student in our DSW program here. Jacqueline currently holds a position of Executive Director at the Buffalo and Erie County Workforce Investment Board. And she, in this capacity, plays a pivotal role in fortifying the workforce development system by channeling funding toward job seekers and employers and facilitating a wide range of training opportunities. This is where DEIA is just really essential to what she does. prior to this, she just has a wealth of experience in Buffalo. She served as Executive Director of Family Independence at the Erie County Department of Social Services and oversaw the critical divisions such as Medicaid, SNAP, there's formerly food stamps, and employment and daycare. She also has tons of experience in community development and community organizing. She was project director at the Buffalo Center for Urban Studies Community Outreach Partnership, and as the director of the Community Action Organization, Maston Resources Center. And she has been involved in transformative neighborhood initiatives such as Better Schools, Better Neighborhoods, and the East Side Neighborhood Transformation Project. Jacqueline has been honored because of her outstanding contributions with the prestigious 2011 Service to Humanity Award and was further honored with the 2016 Business First 40 Under 40 Award. Jackie. And last but not least, we have Elizabeth Ramirez, who is a first-generation Dominican American who's pursuing a dual master's in business administration and social work at the University of Buffalo. I'm happy to say I had her as she was a wonderful student in my policy class. So she came to the School of Social Work with a lot of experience doing youth development and providing one-on-one social and emotional support to youth in New York City. And overseeing 12 year-round youth and adult programs. Since moving to Buffalo, she's delivered social justice training to over 300 plus professionals, and she is interested in optimizing operations for nonprofits. She's participated in diversity and inclusion committees at UB and collaborated with M&T's business banking team to amplify community impact. On top of that, she was awarded, she's a social impact fellow, and she was awarded the Prentice Family Foundation Fellowship in 2023. She aims to translate her nonprofit experience to support the social challenges of underrepresented groups in corporate Western New York and bridge the gap between the nonprofit and corporate sectors. In the past year, Elizabeth launched Ellie's Empanadas to share the flavors of Dominican cuisine. Un poco de sabor dominicano. So she's already enhancing DEIA here in Buffalo. Elizabeth attributes her motivation, values, and estilo to her mother, Adelgiza Rivera, who instilled in her the importance of perseverance and cultural pride in her pursuit of social justice. So as you can see, we are going to hear from some very, very qualified people. We're going to have the presenters present, and then there'll be time at the end. We have at least 30 minutes planned for discussion and Q&A. So please feel free when you're done to ask questions. So we're going to start with Seval.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Elena, for that introduction and for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. And thank you all here and online for joining us during lunch. We're wrapping up the month of March, and the dean stole the line from me, but it's not just Women's History Month, but also National Social Work Month. So I'm really honored to be included in this conversation among social work colleagues who provide invaluable services to members of our communities in their time of most need. Today's conversation is about advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in challenging times. I've been given half an hour for my remarks. Hopefully I'll wrap up a little bit earlier so we have more time for Q&A. I'll provide first an overview of why I think the times are challenging, why there is still a need for us to advance DEI in higher education. I'll also provide some examples from my experience advancing DEI in a public California university with a ban on affirmative action in place. And I'll conclude by why I think we're positioned rather well to continue to advance DEI here at UB. As advocates of a more inclusive and equitable society, we today face serious challenges on a few fronts. First, decisions by a hostile majority on the US Supreme Court. Also a nationwide concerted legislative effort by the conservative right, which Philomena alluded to, and the co-optation of First Amendment and DEI concepts by those who believe that recognizing the rights of some necessarily means the loss of rights by others. These are interrelated and they are parts of the same concerted and systemic effort to undo and undermine the advances we have made in the United States in terms of overcoming inequities and discriminatory practices stemming both from this country's violent history and from racist and xenophobic narratives formulated in the past few decades. We can call these concerted and very purposeful set of efforts DEI phobia. I think the term makes perfect sense because underlying the justifications offered in these anti-DEI efforts is a real fear that if some in society are recognized and are given the tools to achieve equitable outcomes, then others must lose something. It's the pie theory, right? There is a limited pie, so if I take a piece, then there is none left for others. So this is the very logic in recent cases. We see pending bills and pending legislation attacking DEI initiatives. So let's look more closely at how DEI phobia has manifested itself recently. As I trust we all know by now, last June 2023, in the case of Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, which I'll refer to as the Harvard case or Harvard decision, the US Supreme Court decided that race-conscious admissions violated the Equal Protection Clause of the US Constitution. The court effectively overruled its earlier decisions in Regents of the University of California v. Bakke, which is a 1978 case, and a 2003 case of Grutter v. Bollinger. These cases had allowed for affirmative action in college admissions, albeit in limited ways. Bakke had prohibited the use of quotas in admissions, and Grutter later limited the use of race as only a plus factor as part of a holistic review process in admissions. So already there was a process of limiting how we applied affirmative action in admissions. In effectively overruling these earlier decisions, the Harvard case has rendered the use of race in admissions simply impermissible. I, along with many other constitutional law scholars, take this decision to be the first in a line of others to come, challenging affirmative action in other contexts, specifically and especially in the context of employment. In higher education, the Harvard decision has serious implications, given that a large number of universities across the country declare diversity as their mission, and many have used explicit affirmative action strategies to achieve that mission. Prior to the Harvard decision, states like California and Florida had existing bans on affirmative action already in place, barring the use of race and other protected categories in admissions and hiring. So there's a lot of value, in my opinion, in learning from the experiences of universities and colleges in these states so that we can continue to diversify our student bodies and our workforces across this country, despite the affirmative action bans in place and more to come. In California, for example, the ban has been in place since 1996 when a constitutional amendment called Proposition 209 banned the consideration of race, ethnicity, sex, and national origin in admissions and hiring. So experiences from California, again, is very useful because the universities in California continue to diversify their student bodies and their faculties and staff, despite the bans in place. And I'll speak a little bit more about that in a little bit. The second challenge to DEI efforts is, as I mentioned earlier, the concerted and rather well-organized legislative efforts across the country. Chronicle of Higher Education has a really great legislation tracker for those who are interested. And so the tracker shows that since 2023, so just a span of a year and a few months, 81 bills in 28 states have been introduced to attack DEI efforts. And 37 of those have been introduced this year, just in the last 3 months. These bills vary in scope, with some seeking to ban DEI offices and staff, certainly DEI funding. This is of course on the state side. Ban DEI statements in hiring and promotion and in admissions. Ban consideration of race, sex, ethnicity, national origin in admissions and hiring. So these have all been the substance of these bills. And I want to repeat the number again, 81 bills introduced in 28 states since 2023, right? And 37 of those this year. So of these 81 bills, 11 have become law. 13 have legislative approval already in place. And some good news though, 33 have either failed to pass or were vetoed or have been tabled. Tabled is not that great, of course, because it means, you know, we can look forward to additional efforts in the future. So in 2024 so far, last 3 months, 5 state legislatures have passed anti-DEI bills in Alabama, Florida, Wyoming, Utah, and Indiana. And if you're a member of a state legislature and you hope to pass one of these bills, you want to, you know, make sure DEI is not a part of your state, well, you're in luck, because there are 2 conservative think tanks, the Manhattan Institute and the Goldwater Institute, and they have provided a model state legislation language for use across the country. So really very few individuals are behind these bills, but they distribute the language and the capability to pass these laws across the country. So another type of legislation targets our freedom to educate, teach, and learn about DEI-related topics, including critical race theory, anything and everything related to LGBTQ+ identities, and other related topics. Since 2021, there have been about 360 such bills introduced in state legislatures, with 52 of those introduced in the last 3 months. All types of anti-DEI legislation and bills include references to quote unquote divisive concepts. So these are concepts that are inherent to our critical self-assessment as a society, such as racism, sexism, and other types of discriminatory practices that create systemic inequities. These concepts, which many of us experience on a daily basis as realities because of our demographic identities, these concepts are considered divisive in all of these bills and laws. And we have not even addressed the book bans sweeping the country. According to PEN America, in the 22-23 school year, there were 3,362 recorded instances of books banned. 3,362. An increase of 33% from the preceding school year. I don't have the numbers for this year. I'm not really sure what other books they're going after, but among the banned books are the Bible and things like that, because, you know, there's, I guess, mention of some kind of sex going on there. So states are not the only places where anti-DEI legislation have been advanced. The US Congress is also a sort of source of anti-DEI legislation, with a number of such bills currently pending. Just this month, just about 10 days ago, a new bill was introduced to amend the Higher Education Act of 1965 to, and I quote, require institutions of higher education to adopt and adhere to principles of free speech. This proposed act's title is Respecting the First Amendment on Campus Act. Sounds pretty good, right? Who doesn't want First Amendment on campus? But here is what the proposed bill requires. It requires public universities to eliminate DEI statements, among other things, arguing that such statements violate the free speech rights of students and employees. If you're confused, the reasoning is that if I have to submit a statement saying, here's how I have advanced DEI, then this doesn't respect my freedom to say DEI is awful, right? This bill also would allow for single-sex student organizations, i.e. exclude women from all male, it doesn't say that, but you know, we can guess that's what it goes back to. Because laws that ban such practices were passed to protect women's access to such organizations. So this proposed bill, in my opinion, is a great example of how generally progressive concepts of individual freedom, such as free speech and academic freedom, have been co-opted by the conservative right to launch anti-DEI and anti-progressive attacks, especially in the higher education context. So I was recently in a meeting of chief diversity officers in AAU institutions, Association of American Universities, for those who are not in the academy. AAU has conducted its own national survey, you know, because there are all these national surveys out there that say parents are not sending their kids to universities anymore because they're sick and tired of all this DEI liberal indoctrination. So AAU did its own national survey, conducted it, and found that regarding higher education, the main concern of parents is not DEI, but or liberal indoctrination, but overwhelmingly their primary concern is the rising cost of higher education, which we can all appreciate, right? The same survey found that almost everyone, including people of color, are confused about the meaning of DEI. So when you just say DEI, many of them don't really know what that is. They know it's bad, but they don't really know what it is, right? And we can guess that from just the statistics of the survey. So we have some educating to do. Those of us who are advocates for diversity, equity, and inclusion and a better future for the next generation, and the one after that, we have some educating to do. And we have to do that so that we are the ones framing the conversation, and we are the ones defining the terms. We are the ones defining what diversity means, what it implies, and where it can take us, because the current narrative creates a dichotomy between diversity, equity, and inclusion, and our individual freedoms, such as free speech. And while the various bills and legislation appears to be partisan, a conservative push, and it primarily is, there are many who identify as liberals and still oppose DEI initiatives, especially in higher education. For example, my husband shared with me just last night a story from the Harvard Crimson, the daily paper of the university, where a panel of professors, two of them law professors, one of them a Harvard law professor, and all of them women of color, discussed DEI in higher education. Now, only one of those faculty defended DEI initiatives in higher education. They all identify as liberal faculty. Liberal female faculty of color. I have to repeat that, right? Because we make a lot of presumptions about who thinks what and who's pushing for what. The other two female professors of color, one of them said that DEI in higher education limits free speech rights of students and faculty. And the other one said DEI is an affront to faculty's academic freedoms, because it does not allow faculty to dissent, to be against DEI, to not care about diversity, to not care about creating inclusive classrooms, et cetera, et cetera. So I share this with you to highlight that the attacks on DEI broadly are very real, and they come from all kinds of places and all kinds of political directions. And I get very frustrated hearing these things because these attacks are primarily based on absolute sheer ignorance about what we do in our DEI offices, and in all kinds of different positions advancing DEI in higher education. So despite many DEI offices that came into existence in the last decade or so especially, and despite all our efforts in our universities, there are still very real, continuing and persistent inequities in higher education. First, our student bodies do not always reflect the diversity of the communities that we serve. This is especially important in public universities like this one, where we owe a fiduciary duty to the communities surrounding us, right? And today, across the country, Black, African American, Hispanic or Latinx, and Indigenous students continue to be underrepresented in our universities. And where they are represented, there are continuing equity gaps in terms of, for students of color, in terms of retention and graduation rates and time to graduation. Our faculties continue to be predominantly white, and even in Hispanic serving and minority serving institutions, all my previous institutions were both those things. Faculty demographics are nowhere near representative of our student diversity. For faculty of color, there still remain inequities in terms of cultural taxation on time and energy. And in many institutions, there remain equity gaps in terms of tenure and retention rates and times, not to mention compensation. So DEI offices, and this is just a part of what DEI should be concerned about. So DEI offices, if they're actually allowed to do substantive and meaningful work, and not all of them are, they should be addressing these issues, and they do. I have addressed these issues in every position I have held as a chief diversity officer in higher education. The anti-DEI movement, whether on the conservative or the liberal side, portrays DEI offices as simple offices that exist to do programming and interfere in conservative speech. That is the portrayal, and that is precisely why we need to reframe the conversation. Because this portrayal simply does not match my experience. I've now served as a chief diversity officer in 3 public universities in California, Nevada, and New York, 3 very different states. 2 rather blue and 1 rather purple. Nevada would be that one. I'll share a little bit about my 4 years I spent in California. I was in the California State University system. It's the 2nd largest after SUNY. And it taught me so much about what still needs to be done and how we can do it, even in the face of opposition and even with bans on affirmative action. As I mentioned earlier, California has had an affirmative action ban since 1992. So on my campus at California State University, San Bernardino, situated in one of the poorest counties in the country, we were absolutely bottom up, top down, committed to diversifying our student body. And for the most part, despite some faculty pushback, we were very committed to diversifying our tenure line faculty. And that's another disparity that exists, right? Most tenure line faculty, we see more diversity in non-tenure line positions across the United States than in tenure line positions. And that has a direct impact on job security, not to mention compensation levels. So given that there was an affirmative action ban in place, we had to get creative in other ways. One of the things we did was focus our efforts on outreach and engagement. For example, to increase our Black and African American student population, we engaged in outreach to area Black churches and hosted events on our campus for the Black community, such as the Martin Luther King Day breakfast, where we recognized community leaders and celebrated the day together with our Black community in the region. Now, just a backdrop, in California, some diversity just happens to universities. For example, you just get Hispanic diversity in certain areas because you're serving that community. But you still have to work to get Black students and Indigenous students, right? So those numbers are still very, very low, even in institutions like, say, California State University, San Bernardino, where 63% of students are Hispanic Latinx. And over 70% of students come from underrepresented backgrounds. We still have to be very purposeful about recruitment of Black and Indigenous students. So these were some of the efforts. We also engaged in extensive outreach to our area Native tribes, and we built close relationships with them. Took a lot of effort, but absolutely worth it. We hosted an annual powwow and an annual breakfast for our Native tribes. And that really did work. We continuously increased our Black and Indigenous student populations because we were able to relate to the communities that we cared about their children and that we would make sure they would be taken care of once they reached our university. We also did other things once the students were at our university. We continuously looked at equity gaps, and we closed those equity gaps more than 50% in the 4 years I was there, because we were data-driven and very deliberate about what kind of support we provided to students, meeting them where they were, whether they were from underrepresented communities or first generation or undocumented students. On the faculty recruitment front, we worked with our department chairs and deans to proactively, again, engage in outreach to Hispanic serving and minority serving institutions with doctoral programs. And we directly recruited doctoral students and faculty from those programs. We did a bunch of other things. I'm not going to bore you with it. Happy to expand on that in Q&A. We hired around 100 tenure-line faculty in my 4 years there. About 60% of them came from minoritized backgrounds, about 20% from underrepresented minority backgrounds. So I share all this with you as a ray of hope for what we can do despite the rising DEI phobia and rising bans across the country. Finally, I will end by sharing with you that I'm very happy to be at the University at Buffalo, where I feel very much supported by a great president and provost, so definitely bottom down support, and a great group of deans. Too bad our dean's not here. Oh, I just praised you. Just talking about you. I just want to, I'm ending on a positive note that I feel very supported here as Chief Diversity Officer, not just by President and Provost, but a great group of deans. And then, of course, I called out the fact that you weren't here and then. I do want to note that all our leadership are truly dedicated to advancing DEI and to continuously create a university that is more and more inclusive and where we see more and more equitable outcomes for our students, faculty, and staff. I will share just one success I see. While I've been here for 4 months, still learning a lot. But we have already become a member of HACU, which is the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, which will, whose resources will provide our students, faculty, and staff with invaluable opportunities for professional development and for building community. It's great to be in the midst of a university community so dedicated to creating an increasingly more inclusive and equitable environment. I see that much great work has been done already here at UB, but I know that we have much more work to do. And I look forward to doing that work with all of you in community, camaraderie, and collaboration. Thank you so much for being here and for listening to my, for me, rather long speech. Thank you.
Wow, that is going to be a tough act to follow, but I'm going to try my hardest because this DEIA is such an important topic, and I would like to just start, and I will be ending with a quote. First quote is from Barack Obama. Rather than pointing fingers or assigning blame, let's use this occasion to expand our moral imaginations, to listen to others more carefully, to sharpen our instincts with empathy, and remind ourselves of all the ways that our hopes and dreams are bound together. Again, Barack Obama. So what does that look like? What does it take to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility? It takes courage, it takes hope, and it takes empathy. In order to have the courage, hope, and empathy, you have to be able to see DEI as a matter to enhance creativity and innovation. Diversity fosters a variety of prospects, perspectives, experiences, and ideals, leading to more innovative solutions and creative approaches to problem solving. When people from diverse backgrounds collaborate, they bring unique insights that can drive progress and innovation. Driving progress and innovation eliminates groupthink, and groupthink is what hinders DEI from advancing to the levels that it needs to advance to. So in order to make better decisions, inclusive environments encourage open dialogue and the consideration of different viewpoints, leading to more well-rounded decision-making processes. When a diverse range of voices are heard and valued, decisions are more likely to reflect the needs and interests of all stakeholders. For example, being able to have the courage to share your lived experiences matters. We all have lived experiences. What does that look like in order to break that cycle of groupthink? For example, in my own professional experiences, microaggressions is not a new concept. That has always been around, it's just evolved. And it's evolved for individuals to share those experiences. There was once a time where, there wasn't a platform to share those lived experiences about microaggressions. I can remember one time literally being in a meeting with only one person, myself, who looked like me. And hearing a story that was completely inappropriate, that did not promote any type of diversity, equity, or inclusion. And I can literally remember looking around the room like, am I the only one who's hearing this story right now? And at the end, having the conversation with my leadership team to say, this is what I heard, this is how I felt, this is how I reacted. And again, this is prior to microaggressions having the momentum it has currently. And what happened? I wasn't heard, and I was subsequently let go from the position. Right there, that groupthink mentality didn't allow for my voice or my lived experience to be heard or even acknowledged. In terms of the importance of diversity in the workforce, employers are at a pivotal standpoint currently in this day and age because they are looking for employees. So they are now willing to open their doors to a more diverse and inclusive and equitable population. And in doing that, they have to look internally to some of the policies and systems that have been created that have prevented individuals from accessing the opportunities to have a self-sustaining or a livelihood that will support their families. Again, one of the situations that I love to turn to is the friends and family concept, where if you don't know an individual who can kind of bring you up or pull you up that ladder, you don't get an opportunity. If you're not the individual who's being sought after because of the extensive education or work experience or background you have, you may never open or walk through the doors of a particular institution or work for a system in order for that organization to embrace you with employment. So for me, it's the us versus them. Again, lived experiences for me is being in a meeting setting and hearing leadership not value the clientele that they serve, the populations that they provide services to. And it's, oh, they need this and we know what's better for them. I can remember, especially for one situation, it was those people need us because all they do is take drugs or all they do is, and it was a lot of stereotypical typical conversation. And that power led for others to assume that same type of role and that same type of mentality. So social cohesion and harmony by embracing diversity and fostering empathy can contribute to a greater social cohesion and harmony within our communities. By promoting understanding, tolerance, and respect for differences, organizations can play a role in building a more inclusive society where everyone feels valued and accepted. I think now in the workforce system, knowing that there is a shortage on employees, that employers are more willing. However, that is a delicate balance, especially knowing all the different laws and regulations with affirmative action being challenged and repealed in universities. It's only a matter of time before those same type of approaches and laws lend itself to the workforce system. Systems have been created to prevent the advancement of DEIA. However, it is our job and responsibility as social workers to challenge these systems and design policies and laws at a macro level that promote institutions' commitment to leadership, allocation of resources, evaluation, and accountability to foster DEIA. We can never become comfortable with the bare minimum. So begin to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, and having empathy is a good start. Empathy is essential for social workers as it forms the foundation of our practice, enabling us to connect deeply with our clients or communities and understand the experiences, emotions, and needs. Through empathy, social workers can build trust, foster rapport, and establish meaningful relationships, facilitating effective communication and collaboration. By empathizing with our clients' perspectives and circumstances, we can tailor interventions, support services, and redesign systems that are sensitive to our unique situations, promoting empowerment and self-determination. Additionally, empathy helps social workers advocate for clients' rights, addressing systematic barriers, and promoting social justice, ultimately contributing to positive social change and well-being for individuals, families, and communities. By prioritizing DEIA efforts, fostering open communication, investing in education and training, collaborating with others, and promoting inclusive policies and practices, organizations can advance DEIA even in challenging times, ultimately creating equitable and inclusive workplaces for all. As social workers, we must have the courage to stand up for what is right and just, ensuring that diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded in the fabric of our profession. Doing this requires you to be empathetic and understanding social workers who encourage and who have the courage to create change. So I will close with one final quote from Michelle Obama. You may not always have a comfortable life, and you will not always be able to solve all the world's problems all at once, but don't ever underestimate the importance you can have, because history has shown us that courage can be contagious and hope can take on a life of its own. Thank you.
My speaker notes looks like my class notes. So I'm like, I should have made this font a lot bigger. So I think about social work. I want to talk about social work. I want to talk about being a student. I want to talk about being a student who has had a career, especially a nonprofit, going back to school, what that transition was like for me. But I'll start off by saying that social workers are also generalists. I found that I've had to be a facilitator, a mediator, and a change champion before engaging in any kind of micro practice. As generalists, we can support the work of DEIA from multiple angles. And these are some angles that I've experienced directly, right? From educating your colleagues, sometimes your boss, incorporating new evidence-based practices. The good old ways that we've been doing things may not be the great ways. And or positively contributing to the development of trauma-informed work policies. I think of the most radical ways to be a social worker, and that's to prove people wrong. And that doesn't always come from the hard, soft feeling things, but it can come with the data and the numbers and the ability to communicate changes in a way that's meaningful to different people. That's really why I came back to school.
I worked in nonprofit for 7 years. I did direct service with middle school students, which I would say is the best age group. And then suddenly I was tasked with managing a team that looked like my students. And doing that with through COVID additionally. And something that I felt like I was missing was that confidence to talk about the data and the numbers, right? Speaking to the board whenever I got the chance to. And yes, I had all these heartfelt stories to share, but I didn't have those numbers. And that was something I felt insecure about. So my goal was to go back to school so that I can tell my story and other people's story and have anyone listen. So what does DEIA mean to me? It means collective future building. It's in everything we do, we see and experience, and it brings to light who is here, who isn't, and why. It's an airstrip that propels us to challenge the status quo. And often we are the ones having to build the airplane while flying it. And often it's those of underrepresented identities who are working that plane, building it too. I think back to one of my professors, this wasn't on the paper, but Peter's here. And who asked the class, like day one of interventions, year one, who here is a deviant? And I was like, oh yeah. I already knew where he was going and I was like following. I'm like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. It's for these challenging conversations, these scholarly kinds of conversations in my higher education. As a student of color, first generation, originally from Brooklyn, New York, there were high expectations I had for my education, both in business and in social work. Primarily that I would be surrounded by that revolutionary thinking and momentum, but what I wasn't prepared for was the discomfort I would feel. And it's not from the curriculum or the coursework or financial accounting, which I didn't like very much, but it was really just who I was, my body, my experience, and my personhood in the classroom. No one prepares you for the deep isolation you feel as a student of multiple minoritized identities. Seriously, no one does. And a good of this was having to critically examine my privilege, even in the ways that I felt most oppressed. Back in Brooklyn, it was Black and Latino people, that was my universe. And Buffalo, for so many reasons, challenged that instantaneously. And I was just like not prepared for that. But yeah, having to realize, well, no, I'm in grad school. That's a big damn deal. And I'll potentially and will be in positions of leadership outside of this. And although I have these minoritized identities, I'm gonna have a certain status when I graduate that guarantees opportunities, even financially, that other people don't have. So a little bit of having to work my brain of like, sorry, sis, like you got to get yourself out of that rut because now you're going to be that person with some power and something to say. So how I got involved in this work, right? My professional career has been dedicated to resource sharing, building relationships, and collaborating with community members to make changes in the social sector. And pursuing my dual degree in the School of Management and in social work, I was really hoping to transition my time and my expertise from the nonprofit industry to the corporate realm to address social issues, community impact, and offer support in the plight of underrepresented groups. That is like other colleagues who are in a different department and we're going through this challenge, right? And just being like, hey, you have someone that's here, or talking to students when I graduate and be like, you can totally make it. This is the hidden curriculum. And a large part of my vision for my academic and professional contribution was to combine both educations, right? So that I am looking through a trauma-informed lens, and then I'm using my business education to promote innovative systems and data analysis to inform strategy. It's especially important, like Philomena said, that we offer operational and strategic support to social programs. I think being in it, I was like, holy cow, like, yes, funding is great. And yes, we have all these programs to talk about, but we're outcomes poor. And how do we get out of that? So that hopefully, you know, when I'm in the corporate world, we can really maximize resources, funding, and reach of like the social sector, the people on the ground who are doing and living this work every day. I also worked in my time, I'm gonna graduate this year, this semester, more specifically. I worked as a graduate assistant at UB's Office of Inclusive Excellence, with people that I have shared in that time, with the hopes of doing work related to DEI. When I saw that posting, I'm like, oh yes, finally, like I can do this. And it was so fascinating to think what this role can show me, right? Of like, what does DEI look like from an administrative perspective? And what I enjoyed the most was when I got to work with people. You know, I think when you're in positions of administration, on those higher floors, you can feel a little disconnected, and it's engaging with people that like give you that momentum, that excitement, and that joy. So some of my favorite initiatives was the Visiting Future Faculty Pilot Program, VITAL, for short. And in that time, we recruited 80 plus doctoral students, not from Buffalo, to showcase the city and et cetera, and et cetera. But honestly, it was through my education, it was through connecting with faculty and staff, it was through my Western Erie Prosperity Fellowship that I was able to like approach that and speak to doctoral students in a real way. I got to like talk about like the commercial, historic, and human investment here in Buffalo that I initially didn't have. So having exposure to that first allowed me to speak about things in a more candid way. Some lessons across this journey from being in a direct service position, right? When I started back in 2014 up until 2021, was that mission alone is not enough to motivate, excite, and engage employees. I love a good mission. I love a good culture. I love merch. I will wear the merch. But like when things hit the fan, like that is not gonna get you to the end, right? And when I started supervising people, I realized that that was not enough for them. And that wasn't fair for me to expect that just the mission or like the mission of social work was gonna carry them through. When I worked in a consulting capacity, teaching about DEI in the youth development space, I realized that this is hard work and hard work. And facilitation is my jam. I love games, I love all that stuff. But what I wasn't prepared for was the cultural taxation, which is like the time and energy, the time after the facilitation that I'm like having nightmares. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that was rough. That was hard on me. A third thing I realized is that you can only have so many DEI one-on-one conversations before you're like, all right, I'm done. I'm over this. Until you're like, we need some like concrete actions and initiatives. And you can't keep that momentum going if you don't have that. When I came to UB, right, and I had the opportunity to work with OIX, the School of Management, DEI, multiple fellowships, right, I realized that transparency about capacity and limitations are key to fostering trust. So as a student playing a supportive role in these different spaces, yes, I had some experience, organizational, managerial experience to bank on, even direct support, but having supervisors who told me like, look, this is some of the red tape that we're at. This is where we want to be. This is where what we can realistically do this year was helpful for a student wanting to continue to be involved. You know, like you don't have those high hopes and then suddenly it doesn't happen because you just weren't told about those limitations. A fifth thing I learned was getting cozy and familiar with the numbers. They hold valuable insights and metrics can inform decision-making. Something I'm still working on. And how do you even find those tangible metrics in something that can sometimes feel so much bigger than you? So I realized giving yourself enough time to do that, to identify what those metrics are, is super important. And the last thing I learned in my time and my reflection and getting a job. So I am getting a job starting in August at M&T. I'll be working in their business banking and community activation department, which basically means that like working to support the needs of small businesses while also thinking about community initiatives that the bank can be helpful in. Who knows, things will probably change when I get there, but is that you cannot do this work on your own, period. I think corporate America scared the crap out of me. When I stepped in day one in my internship, I saw all the cubicles and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna cry. But some of the best advice was, is like, even though you're working in this department, you can find people that feel what you're like throwing out in the world, people who have some information, people that can excite you, people that can challenge you, right? And share novel information outside of your department. So like finding those people to ground you not only in your work and your mission, but to be your hype person is so important. And that was my last lesson, my last takeaway. Thank you.
I really want to thank all of you for these incredible remarks and observations and sharing of your lived experiences. I think, we have just reaffirmed the importance of DEIA and seeing how it transcends, it really does transcend the academy. I mean, we're seeing how it functions outside of the academy, especially in the field of social work. So I'm going to open it up for questions.